Hi, how are you today? It's so good to have you with us on this Wednesday before Christmas. And of course, we're not there because I told you I'm taking a vacation. So I'm not here, but we are recording live with Mick Rosado McMeow. How are you, Mick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Jenny. I appreciate you and appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we've tried to do this a couple of times, and you're so busy, and I get busy, and then we kind of do this. So I'm so glad that we're in one place. I would like to start out with one thing, because I like to go back to the beginning just to make sure everybody is on the same page. Mick, what did you do for a living?
Well, I'm a nurse. I still have my nursing license.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So I worked in healthcare, and I worked oncology, critical care. And then at the end of my nursing career, after 28 years, I worked in phase 1 clinical trials. And I did anything from floor nursing all the way to managing outpatient infusions for cancer and other autoimmune diseases.
And you were in practice, you were working during COVID.
Dun, dun, dun.
I know.
Yes.
And what happened to you during COVID?
So during COVID, I was working in clinical trials, and one day they said, okay, we're going to have to close down the whole entire world to flatten the curve for 2 weeks, which turned into over a year.
2 years.
And, all of a sudden, the next day I come to work and there's a security guard outside checking to make sure, who came in and did you have a temperature and did you have a mask and, all that good stuff. And plexiglass went up everywhere and they separated us 6 feet. And I was, Jenny, used to working bone marrow transplant where we took their immune system away. So I was like, okay, well, we used to do good hand washing and, ensuring that everybody was, good and well. You didn't let anybody in who was febrile or whatever, had a fever. But, we were used to doing standard precautions, making sure the patient was safe and secure and good hygiene and hydrated. And suddenly it was like nobody was allowed in, and it was just kind of a flip upside down. And anyhow, that went on for quite a while. And me, I've got a heart that I wear on my sleeve, and a really big mouth, and so I just started talking.
I can't relate to any of that.
Exactly. And I tell you, it really threw me for a loop, because we were locking out family members. And that to me was just the wrong move. But we were also using mRNA technology for people who had relapsed from transplant. So now we were giving it into the vein. We weren't giving it in a shot. And so people were reacting. They were going into cytokine storm, which is where all your immune system is ramped up in order to fight against itself to get rid of all that residual disease. And so I knew how sick these people were becoming. And I started hearing about remdesivir that was being given. And I knew that back in 2018, it was used in the Congo, and they had to take it out of the clinical trial because it had a huge amount of renal failure associated with it, and a death rate of 53 to 86%. Regardless of viral load, meaning that people were being given remdesivir in this trial and they were dying of the remdesivir, yet they didn't have Ebola. So they removed that from the trial. So it was an upside down world. And I started talking about, let's bring people back in, let's have some communication. And I was told at that time that if I wanted to be the hub of communication, great, that was wonderful, but white sorority nurses were not needed in healthcare anymore. And whether they meant that for me personally or not, it was said to me. And that blew my mind, Jenny. And I went home and cried, sobbed uncontrollably for about 2 weeks. And then my husband said, enough is enough. And so I left nursing, and I'm doing other things now. I'm an advocate. I defend medical freedom. I started my podcast, Intentional which is on Rumble, and I do a live broadcast, shameless plug there, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Talk 4 Media. But I started finding all these people who I actually met at a re-election for Governor Stitt, and they were like, our loved ones died of remdesivir, and I was like, wait, what? And so I started connecting. They were part of the former Feds group Freedom Foundation, and I started showing their stories, and I was like, we're still using remdesivir right now in the hospital for clinical for COVID hospital protocols. And I was like, this is ridiculousness. Wait a minute. And so I started working to help get investigations into these hospitals, because people are still dying. The former Feds group Freedom Foundation is still being called daily with people saying, look, my loved one's getting remdesivir, they're going into renal failure.
Still today.
Today.
Really?
Yeah.
Nick.
Even last
Are they still giving out remdesivir today, Mick?
Right on.
Really? Wow.
Still doing it. Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, I just talked to a couple of the advocates from the Citizen Task Force volunteers, because they're all volunteers there. They call themselves the Wolf Pack, because they are widows and widowers who lost their loved ones to remdesivir. And they said even as soon as last week, they were being called from people saying, my loved ones are getting remdesivir. They're going into renal failure. Please help us get our loved ones out of the hospital and get them to
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm still doing this. It's like I look like a moron because my mouth won't close. How is this happening, Nick?
It's because the CDC is running that. And, we know that they were getting incentivized monies. They were getting money for every positive case of COVID. They were getting monies for giving remdesivir. They were giving monies for people being put on a ventilator. They were getting monies for people who were dying with the diagnosis of COVID. And so whether that incentivization is still going on, I believe it still is. I know that people like Rachel Rodriguez from the Beers Law Group, who we're working with, Warner Mendenhall from the Freedom Council, who we're working with, is having lawsuits and working with people. And so I'm sure that they are still getting monies, and the CDC still pushes it. They're not going to backtrack on that. And I think it's power and control. And I think it's the biggest crimes against humanity that ever was. It's a democide. They're killing people for money. And I say that because we gave evidence when we did a state interim study that was just done back in October, that was hosted and sponsored by Representative J.J. Humphrey, and all of the doctors came in, Dr. Pierre Corian, Dr. David Martin, Warner Mendenhall, Dr. Jancy Lindsay. I mean, the list goes on and on, Rachel Rodriguez, and they all said the same thing. This is egregious, and it has to be investigated, and it has to stop. And it's not just that, but it's also the gene therapy. I call them bioweapons, and some people call them COVID vaccines, but they are dangerous. And as of, I think it was either March or April of this last year, there was almost 1.7 million adverse events that are related to the COVID-19 bioweapon. And they range all the way from myocarditis to miscarriages to what they're now calling adult death syndrome. But people are just dropping dead and dying suddenly. And I know we've seen those stories, but they, and neurological disorders, people can't work, they're disabled, and it's egregious.
Or they get really weird things, like my mom, who got leukemia out of nowhere after having 3 vaccines and died in a week. So no.
Yeah. It's way too much, and it really has to stop. And that's what we've been fighting for here in Oklahoma, but not just in Oklahoma. I've connected myself to the former group Freedom Foundation, and I'm
I
going to give
do
a
want
little
you to
plug
talk
there.
a little bit about that because I don't really know anything about them. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they're a 501c3 organization, and they fight for anybody who has had civil liberty violations. So they do more than just fighting for those people who have lost their lives to the COVID hospital protocols, although they do have a separate section, the COVID Humanity Betrayal Project, chbmp.org. But they also fight for people like the January Sixers, and other people who have been wronged because the government stepped in. And, there's groups where the government has walked in and seized their cryptocurrency accounts. Anybody who has been violated. But their largest part that I am attached with is the COVID Humanity Betrayal Project, and they are nationwide. They have groups in chapters in every state, and here in Oklahoma we are fortunate enough to have both a chair and a vice chair, and I am fortunate enough to be connected with them. They do rallies every year, hospital homicide. They bring in physicians, they bring in victims, they bring in loved ones, and the pictures of the loved ones who have died cover the walls. I mean, they are posters, huge, giant size posters, and they cover the wall, and they're not repeated pictures. It's something that I really am praying that this new administration and anybody who's connected to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., please, we have submitted a brief to the Attorney General to open up criminal investigation and prosecutions. And all we need is one courageous AG. So I'm hoping that the administration maybe gives a wink and a nudge and says, look, Gettner Drummond, this is important. And the stories are similar across the nation, from New Jersey all the way to California. They all say the same thing. These people, it wasn't just the remdesivir, it was the starvation, it was the dehydration, it was the isolation, it was the lack of care, not being bathed, not being given, not being treated. I mean, I know you guys have heard the stories too. They went into the hospital and basically they were like taken hostage. I mean, they weren't allowed to have their advocates there. And we know that studies have shown that in upwards of 30% of people die of premature death when they are denied the loved ones around them, when they're isolated and when they're separated and when they're lonely, the rate of death goes up.
Well, and it wasn't just even that for the patients, it was for the whole family. I have a very close friend whose mother got brain cancer during that time. And it was a glioblastoma, so it's not like there was much that you could do. I don't think she somehow didn't manage to be cured because of COVID, but she managed to die by herself, and they made it very easy for her to just die by herself by excluding all of the family members. So in the name of COVID. So, I mean, what a horrible, horrible thing to happen to a person and to their family. Yeah,
absolutely. It is atrocious. And I'm embarrassed, Jenny, as a nurse. I mean, I can tell you, and I graduated back in 1994. And, my very first rule or regulation of my own, there's the duty to do no harm and to ensure that, you treat everybody with fairness and ensure that they have the best care that they can. But I saw so many people who were dying alone. That was my goal. You will never die alone if you're on my shift. And I made it a point that if their family members couldn't get there or you couldn't find their family members, that you weren't alone. But these people were dying alone. And that should never, ever happen. Denied their priests, denied their last rites sacraments. In what world? In what world did we allow that to happen? And it's shameful that we allowed that. And I love being a nurse. I love the doctors that I worked with, but never again, never again. We can't allow it. It's too important.
Well, tell us a little bit about this brief, because I got it up so that people can actually see it. Would you tell us a little bit about this, please?
Yeah, so this brief right here was actually written by a wonderful lawyer. Her name is Rachel Rodriguez, and she is the head of the founder of the Veers Law Group. And this brief, it has been submitted in the states of Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma. We actually have it in the hand of the Attorney General. And they also are doing Missouri, and then coming soon is Michigan and California. And it is on behalf of the victims, the loved ones who were left behind, whose family members died in the hospitals of the COVID hospital protocols. And they have their medical records, and we're looking into all of those. And what it shows is that these people, and if you look down on here, we are asking for investigations because we can show probable cause of murder. We can show, and these are what J.J. Humphrey, Representative J.J. Humphrey has called the RICO charges. We could show probable cause of things like engaging in a conspiracy to engage in patterns of criminal offenses. We can show where there was verbal abuse. I mean, we could just show things where these people were, it was basically torture for them.
Well, you skipped over kidnapping, frankly, and I think that was one of the biggest ones, because how do you not consider the fact that you have a loved one in a place where they won't let you leave, but then they won't let anybody come in? How is that not kidnapping?
It is. And let me go even a little further than that. We actually have people within our group who were threatened by the police for trying to enter into the building to see their loved one.
Crazy.
They were being threatened with police action and told that if they came in, that they would be hauled off to jail. So that is kidnapping, and you get into, these people became a hostage. So, you know, it's just outrageous that this happened, but we are bringing this on behalf of those victims. And Jenny, we're not stopping. We're going into the community, because according to the CDC, 20,000 people in the state of Oklahoma only, just in the state of Oklahoma, they say died of COVID. Well, they weren't dying in their homes. We weren't pulling people deceased out of their homes. We weren't taking homeless off of the street in droves deceased. They were dying in the hospital. So we want to know how many of those people were in the hospital, how many of them received the hospital protocol, how many received remdesivir, how many of those people are not COVID related, they're COVID hospital protocol related. And we have the right to know that. Those loved ones have the right, because one of our widows said it best. She said, my children didn't just lose their father, they lost their mother as well, because I have been absolutely devastated by this, financially, spiritually, emotionally, and there are days where they can't function. So we have to make this stop. But if you go down a little farther in the brief, you'll see that we are bringing these crimes against the great and powerful Dr. Fauci, you know, Mr. Science himself. We're going after Deborah Birx. We're going after Rochelle Walensky. We're going after other people who are in there. Peter Daszak, where all the money was given to, you know, the Eco Alliance, and that money was funneled through them and then to the Wuhan lab. We know that now. And we're also looking into those hospital administrators who blindly followed orders without questioning and ensuring that they did everything above the book, and said, well, wait a minute. Why are these people dying? Why are so many going into renal failure? You know, there was a duty to do no harm, and they just pushed that aside. They pushed patient rights aside. They
Yeah.
pushed informed consent aside, Jenny.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
why would you not tell people? I mean, there are so many charts where it's written up above, unvaccinated. That was another big thing. They were discriminated against because of their vaccine status. On every page, it would list out unvaccinated. And then in some of the charts, it listed out their family members who were unvaccinated. Why? Why are you doing that? Or they had an informed consent and it just said patient on there, no name. Or they had do not resuscitate forms. Nobody knew that they were put as a do not resuscitate. The family never consented to it, but they did palliative care consults without anybody's knowledge. And the DNR, the do not resuscitate form, says patient. Wait a minute. This is corruption that stinks like rotten fish out on a rock for 4 days.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I like about you the best is that you're like a little bulldog, and you won't let this go, because so many of us. I mean, when my mom died, and I did the research that showed that blood cancers were increasing following COVID, and she had 3 vaccinations. I didn't know what to do, Mick. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go rage at OU Hospital where she died? I mean, what are you supposed to do? So I so appreciate you staying on this, because all of those people that are mentioned in this, there has to be some actual comeuppance for them. So tell us okay, so you have the lawsuit. You're trying to get Gittner Drummond to bring the lawsuit. Is that where we are?
Well, what happened, let me back up a little bit. We had a COVID interim study. Now, before that, we had done medical forum briefs. I brought people to the Capitol and they spoke. And then we had a Senate and House hearing and we brought more people to the Capitol. I mean, we're talking medical experts, legal experts. We're talking experts in manufacturing and drug research. We also brought those loved ones who lost their family members in the hospital. So lots of evidence was kind of peppered along the way. And then we had brave Representative J.J. Humphrey, who said, I'll open up an interim study and make it part of the state congressional record. And I said, I want to be the person to help you. And he said, great. And so with his approval, I organized a group of medical and legal experts to come together. And we went to the Capitol. There were so many of us, Jenny, that they had to open up 4 overflow rooms because so many people, that's how many people are concerned about this. And what they did is they spoke about not just the dangers of the mRNA bioweapons, the vaccines and the effects there. They spoke about not just the hospital protocol, but they talked about the fraud that was involved. They made those connections and it was very, very well done. And I can send you the link, but there is a congressional testimony on that. And so one of those people who spoke was Rachel Rodriguez. And she had a brief, and we knew that this brief right here laid out not just the evidence, but it also showed the probable cause of how to link that evidence to those charges, the kidnapping and the murder and all of that. And so that brief then took and put the right now we have 18 names, but I can tell you I've got way more than that we're going to resubmit. And we took all of that information. Representative J.J. Humphreys took that. He outlined it, with, the stuff that he wanted to put in there to make sure it all sounded good. And what we have done is to ask for legislative and executive action. So we're not going through the court. We're going through like a grand jury type of situation where we're going through the legislator. Okay. Yeah. And so what we're asking AG Gettner Drummond to do is simply open up an investigation.
Okay.
I can tell you we have hot spots. We have counties where people have died. We have 4 people in Tulsa. We have 4 people in Shawnee. We have 4 people in Stillwater. We have them in these hospitals. They all died around the same time. They all received remdesivir. They all received the hospital protocol. They all died. And so we're asking for him to just open up an investigation into those hospitals and find all of the evidence that is there. And we will help him in every way, because the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation not only has the eyewitness victims that are there, but they have doctors who are attached. They have lawyers who are attached, and other lawyers who are outside of that, like Warner Mendenhall and Rachel Rodriguez and others, who will come in and help them look through that information and be able to say, yes, this is what happened, and let's get accountability and let's get justice. Now, I can tell you many of them go, look, we're not even looking for the money, the victims. They're like, that would be wonderful. That would be icing on the cake. We're not looking for that. We're looking for this to ensure that it never happens again. Because, yes, right. Because they just re-upped the PrEP Act and everything else, for COVID until 2029, I think it was. Secretary Bashara just did that. So it's like they're still trying to come and say, okay, we're in a state of emergency and they're covered and CYA until 2029. No. We can't do that.
Well, you've got an interesting, because you can't stay on for too long, unfortunately, but I want to hit this part because it's just so maddening. So you have, I'm going to throw this up here. Just hang on one second. I'm just going to hit every window other than the one that I need to hit, because that's the way it always works.
I love it.
So you actually went out and you created a town hall. You created a town hall, and I'm going to put this up so that everybody can see what it was. Yes. You created a town hall. You're doing another one on the 14th, but I want you to talk about getting involved with this. And then you had a town hall that was scheduled in the Shawnee area. Tell us about what happened there.
So after the brief was submitted to the Attorney General, and because we know there are 20,000 people out there, and if you got a death rate of 53 to 86%, then the majority of those people received remdesivir and died in the hospital of the protocol. So we want to reach out, but we want to provide information. We want to tell them about what kind of action that we're doing. We wanted to provide them resources, and we wanted the people to be able to make their own decisions and decide, gosh, is this something I want more information about? Do I want to be involved in this? Do I want to submit my name as a witness and say, yes, this happened to my loved one, AG Gettner Drummond, please open up investigations? Or do I say, no, I don't believe it. And they do what they need to do. Totally their choice. Mm-hmm. So we started in the town of Shawnee because we do have 4 people at this time who died in the hospital there. They died around the same time, and their loved ones are part of this brief. And so we sent the flyer. It was set up through the GOP, and it was set up with one of the people there who works with Moms for Liberty. They got us set up at the Gordon Cooper Technology Center, sent the flyers. Everything was great. Former Feds was giving their information because they're a 501c3. We sent out flyers. We're doing advertisements. The day before, mid-morning, the day before the event, we received notification from Superintendent McCormick that said, no, we are canceling this and you're not allowed to come in because of the fact that this would potentially create unrest in the community. I don't know what they think we were going to do. We weren't going to bring pitchforks and torches. We were bringing medical and legal and eyewitness experts, and we were going to present information. We weren't going to tie anybody down. We weren't going to force it into them and be like, you do this, or, we're coming after you. We were going to be like, here's the information, and please do with it as your heart leads. Well,
they
she
actually used the verbiage, create unrest.
Yes, that is the comment. And it is part of, I guess, their community standards
Good night.
that they won't sponsor anything that could potentially create unrest in the community. And so they said it could, or potentially could, or would create unrest. And so, no, you can't come in. And so we said, well, wait a minute. Well, I don't understand. Well, then I find out that their board, their president is an optometrist. I don't know. I don't know, if maybe, SSM Health went to them. I do know that is a big stronghold in the Shawnee community. I don't know. I don't have that information. I'm just trying to connect dots here. But basically we were like, okay, we think that it was uncomfortable for them. They are a VOTEC center and they didn't want anybody to be offended, God forbid, and they didn't want anybody to have the truth, so they canceled it. We went to the commission meeting. There was a city commissioner meeting, and we went. I spoke. One of the people from the chair of the GOP, Bill Ruth, he spoke. One of the people who lost her husband in the hospital, the SSM hospital, she spoke. And we said, look, accountability and justice are not inciting words. They are appropriate actions into a legislative and executive action that would allow people to have some semblance of understanding of what happened to their loved one, and not just their loved ones, but the potential of thousands of others across the state, and how many hundreds of thousands of others. And all we need is one courageous one, and then those dominoes will fall in the other states. And so anyhow, so we spoke at that. Well, that evening, Bill and I went up to the VOTEC Center because we didn't want anybody to show up and be like, well, is this a grift? What kind of chicanery is this? And so they wouldn't let us in the building. They were like, nope, you can't come in. And it was like, well, wait a minute. We're not gonna hurt anybody. We're not gonna say anything. I wasn't even going to say anything bad. I was just gonna say, unfortunately, it's rescheduled. We're looking at, maybe holding it in a different area. Here's my card. God bless you. Do you want information? Whatever. That's all we were going to do. And they were like, nope, ixnay. So we stood out in the freezing cold. And we, anybody who came up who was like, yeah, I was going to come there, who didn't hear from it by word of mouth or whatever, we gave them that information. But now we're moving on to Ada. We're not holding any grudges, but we do feel that it's a shame that in this day and age, Jenny, that we have people that are still not willing to allow people to speak after all of the tons of evidence that has come out. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was saying, look, the Biden-Harris administration made me shut my mouth and made me shut down posts and content about ivermectin. So
I wanted to ask you to just interject, because you know how I am about taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
I ride these people on taxpayer dollars. So you were at the Pottawatomie County VOTEC, correct?
Yes.
Who pays for the Pottawatomie County VOTEC?
So there is some question there that we're still trying to get answers to. Apparently, there's a special tax that was done in the county of Pottawatomie, and a percentage of that tax goes to the VOTEC. But then we were told, and this was told to me secondhand, that there are special groups that specialize in funding VOTECs, and that's where the largest amount of that funding comes from. And so we are hoping that there's a brave reporter out there who has done this information. And I know there's a reporter, Mary, who comes on with you, and I think she's actually looking into it. And we're trying to get that information to see who are these special groups, who are they, who funds them, and what becomes of that, because you shouldn't be allowed to get money from the taxpayers and then suppress free speech. That's not how it works.
Not at all. And I know for a fact that Oklahoma County vote tax are paid for with property taxes. So I don't know how Pottawatomie County would do it differently, but there's a possibility every county decides their property taxes, in a different way, which is weird. But
yeah. And that's what we're trying to find out too, because it's like, well, I was like, oh, it's taxpayer funded. And then, I was told, no, it's not taxpayer. There's a small amount, and there's these special groups. And I'm like,
interesting.
Who are the special groups? And then that's where the conversation ended.
Well, I think somebody's going to have to check into that, because if there are any tax dollars spent on that at all, for them to tell a user who is a taxpayer essentially hit the road, Jack, is just come on, you got to be joking me. Well, Mick, what can people do to help you with this? What's the best thing? Give everybody a path forward for you. What can we do to help?
So here's what I would like. I would like, if you were told that your loved one died in the hospital of the COVID protocols, please contact me at mickmeow.com. Mick, M-I-C, at Mick, M-I-C, meow, MEOW.com. If you are vaccine injured, or your loved one died of the vaccine, or you think that there was something that wasn't quite right in Camp Chippewa that was related to COVID, you lost your job because you wouldn't go for the experimental injection, you lost your business, your child is impacted because they were kept out of school, we are going after everything. We are getting those people together because we want to show an overwhelming amount of evidence and overwhelming constituents to show that this was such a detrimental impact, that when they come down again and they say, oh, we got to do, 2 weeks to slow the curve, we as Americans say, no, and we get either stop, resist. We need like federal legislation. We need investigations. But I want you to contact me, and I want you to know that there is a brief right now for investigations into the hospital protocols. If you lost your loved one to a hospital protocol that was a COVID hospital protocol, contact me. We're not going to sit there and just say, oh, yeah, we're going to have physicians look at the medical records. We're going to have the lawyers. We're going to do due diligence here. But we have to find those people because their voices mattered. Their lives mattered. And dear God, we know what they've already got. We got the UN out there, and they're packed for the future, where Secretary Gutierrez now has control to shut down nations because of black swan events, cyber events, outer space, Jenny, outer space events that could potentially be a dangerous epidemic or pandemic or crisis. I think they call them cultural shocks. What the Sparky Jr.? That's a broad reach. Who knows? But
you mean they just made that up?
I think they did. Are you telling me that they're going to say that this is an outer space crisis? Okay, somebody says there's an asteroid that's hurtling toward the Earth and going to hit us in 2029. Am I really going to let Secretary Gutierrez just be like, okay, everybody shut down? What are you going to do, dude? You
Yeah.
know, are you telling me that that's the right thing? No, we need to have some common sense here, some critical thinking.
Do
More
you?
than one supranational leader who thinks that, you
Yeah.
know, he's cheese in a bag of chips.
Yeah, that's a no.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we need to contact the AG's office, AG Drummond, and ask him to get this investigation going?
I would love that. I would love if we could get a letter writing campaign, a phone campaign. I do have an article that was written in the Gateway Pundit by Paul Gardner, and it outlines everything, including what we did here in Oklahoma, that we are handing out to every legislator, every city council member, every county commissioner. We're handing them out to get them in the hands to say, stand with us. But I would love if there was a tsunami of people who would call the AG's office and say, hey, I know you've got this brief. This happened to my loved one. You need to investigate it. And that's part of the stuff that we're working on as well. Letter writing, phone call, banking, and getting as many of the elected officials behind us as well.
So they just need to follow you then you are on every channel in the world.
Yeah, just about. Yeah. X. Let's see. Intentional.
Well, if they
with
just
Mick Meow.
Google Mick Meow, or if they intentional, I mean, will it come up? Will they be able to
if
find
you go
it?
to intentional podcast, intentionalpodcast.org,
Okay.
and you'll find me. That's my
Perfect.
website.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
send
know
me an
you've
email.
got to run. Is there any last thing that you need to tell everybody?
I just want to say to everybody, don't lose hope. We are working on this, but we need you. We need you to be involved. Join us. Email me. Go to my website. You'll be able to contact me. And it's not just happening in our state of Oklahoma. We are going across the nation. And like I said, with the help of former Feds group Freedom Foundation, there are chapters from all the way from Maine all the way to California, and we will get you help and assistance. You're not alone at all. We're here with you, and we will stand in the gap. And I will not stop, Jenny, with the very last breath, my very last breath that I have. I will push forward, because this is the hill I will die on.
Well, Mick,
If need be.
from somebody who lost their mom to the outgrowth of all of that nonsense, I really appreciate you, as I know so many other people do. And thank you for keeping on this like the junkyard dog that you are. And just God bless you for doing that. And thanks for being with us today.
God bless. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.